Good evening. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of September 30th, 2024, here in Memorial Hall, Town Hall. This is our 9th meeting of fiscal 2025. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location in the posted agenda, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link in the posted agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28 and Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their kind assistance. Okay, so I don't see any public out here. So in fact, all members of the board are in person tonight, and just the public's remote. So we're going to move past public comment and go straight to our special town meeting article discussion and vote. And we're fortunate to have Christy Williams, our town manager, and John Steinberg, our finance director, here tonight. So what I think we should be talking about first is Article 2, because we have new numbers, just really on the third part, I think the landfill, and see if anybody has any questions or something. But
Okay. So this number would just go into salary and wages. As I mentioned last time, we don't currently have salary and wages for the landfill, but now that we've created the waste management program coordinator role, we have two 19-hour week employees in that holding those positions. And they're grant funded at this time, and it's been really successful in terms of education about the new program, but also enforcement, making sure a lot of folks who are coming here from other towns or coming without stickers are turned away or educated on how to get those stickers if it's appropriate. So the proposal is to continue with the two 19-hour week positions that are currently in place, as well as adding an 8-hour week position. So currently we can't cover all the hours that the transfer station is open with these two positions, and so folks from our public health department have been filling in. But we do have someone who's interested in a limited way to help us cover all of the hours. So this would fund that third position beginning right after town meeting. And it would utilize the full, so it's 2 grants that we currently have. So the 2 grants total $30,202. And so the balance needed for the rest of the year for those 2 19-hour positions plus the 8-hour is this $48,250.
okay, and in fiscal 26, we expect to be decreasing the expense line of that budget and using some of that savings towards these positions as well, probably.
Yeah, I think that, I think both of the grants are accessible to us in the future. I just don't know at what level. So we would continue to apply for those. One of them is specifically calculated on how many people are participating in our program. So how many people are using the transfer station and purchasing stickers. But yes, because of the pay-as-you-throw has been successful to this point in terms of reducing the tonnage, we are paying less, or we anticipate paying less and being able to decrease that budget through this program. So we are tomorrow night expecting to recommend to the select board to sign the new agreement with Harvey's.
Okay. So anybody have any questions on anything in Article 2? No.
So just to be clear, so if the grant was for 30, this is another 50, roughly 80. So is it 160 for those positions for the full year without the grants? Roughly?
So the total amount would be this, so the total amount would be the 78,000, but are you saying, but then we would have to add in the 8-hour-a-week position for the first 4
No, I
months?
was thinking because when you said through the end of the year, I was thinking January, not fiscal year.
Oh, fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
so I'm
fiscal
good.
year.
Yeah,
Yep.
I
We
got
still
it.
have
Yep.
like 9-10 months or something.
Yeah.
11.
I just got done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long drive, very long drive.
Okay, Rod.
So my question was, what is the 8-hour position worth monetarily?
That's a good
Not to do
question.
higher math here, but
I don't have, you mean
If-
the hourly rate for that position?
well, no, just for out of the amount of money we're asking for, how much of that is the 8-hour? The new person.
I don't have that breakdown. Hold on, let me look. Okay. Yeah, I don't have it broken down. I can look it up when we finish,
Well,
but I just don't have it in front
you
of
know,
me.
ironically, I just
Yeah.
happened to go this morning at 9 o'clock on a
Okay.
Monday, and there was not much going on, and I was thinking, do we really need somebody here during?
That's
Yeah.
when you need them there.
Only,
Yeah.
I just wonder what the payback is, because there's some hours that really, you might not need.
Part of,
I think to that is, if we don't have it covered, the people who aren't following the rules will figure that out.
that's the challenge, because I think when we initially put this in place, we thought that we wouldn't need to cover it the whole time. But exactly. So, I mean, even when we close the transfer station, we're still getting people coming in and illegally dumping. We're not proposing that we cover it 24/7, but we really are. Has been a real challenge. So, these are all part-time positions, and at this point, you know, we don't know how long we're going to need them, because at some point, you know, we expect to maybe not have to do it full-time, but at this point, we feel like it's worth it, given what we've been able to turn away the illegal dumping or the illegal use of the transfer station.
I just had one, sorry. Sorry about that. I just had one question. Is this place camera monitored as well?
So my understanding is that there used to be cameras, and we we tried to negotiate into the contract having surveillance, but it was not accepted. So I think once it switched over to Waste Connections, that went away. That opportunity went away.
I just wonder if we pay for that and that's a cheaper way of monitoring versus full-time, because.
But it doesn't correct
Yeah, it's difficult because it's private property. So
Okay.
if they won't allow us to put it there, then we can't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So is the work still being done, or are you still capturing the data, or is there a concerted effort to capture data, number of people, that sort of thing?
No, so I think I had mentioned last time that we weren't capturing data on how many people were being turned away.
Yep.
That we would be able to show you as a reflection of the decrease in tonnage from last fiscal year. So that we will have, yeah.
So I guess I took it when you said we haven't been doing it, hey, that's a great idea, we should do it, but that step was missed and we're just going with tonnage? So,
Yeah, so the tonnage would, right, so we haven't been capturing data on
Okay.
how many people are being turned away. That's not something we've asked of these folks.
but we could, ellipse?
I think that we could. I think, you know, there's a lot going on at some of those really busy times, so I guess I would have to speak with the public health director to understand how easy that would be to capture the data.
And I shouldn't be the only person who'd find value in the data, obviously.
I think it's an interesting data point. I think that the entire, all the changes that we've made is the new program that we put forward. And so in terms of what we're saving, will be reflected in the bills, which reflects the tonnage, so.
I think the collections on points of contact, maybe by hour or broken down by something, would give us an idea if there isn't an opportunity to dial back to non-perfect coverage, not non-regular perfect coverage.
Sure.
Like if they always knew we weren't there Fridays after 3, that would be unhelpful, but if we moved it around, you know, if we realized that there's much lower times that maybe we wouldn't have to cover, Like,
Yeah.
that to me is the opportunity in this.
Yeah, I don't think though, I mean, one piece of it is turning folks away who don't have stickers or who aren't from town, and I think that was really happening a lot in the beginning. So I think, it's also making sure that people are using the pay-as-you-throw bags and recycling appropriately, so it's
Yeah.
all of it. And since the goal of the program was to reduce our waste, we're able to fully capture that data. I don't disagree with you. It's an interesting data point. I'm just not sure, especially at this point, that it reflects more in terms of the success of the program than the tonnage. And I also think that we want people there because we want people to be using the program appropriately. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that may have more, a year or two from now, when you want to see, or how many people are not using the bags properly, or what, when you want to, if you want to wind this down in a year or two, or whatever, I think now,
Is
from my
education.
visits there, this is pretty important.
Yeah.
Well, we're also going to see a reflect, as we talked about the last time. We're going to, it's sort of, so it's all three of those, because the third one that we haven't talked about tonight is the subsidy of the Tidy Town program that was previously done. So that obviously significantly reduces tonnage as well.
Yeah, I just want to make the comment that I think, at least initially, those people are there for education of both members of town and members of not town. And so, at least initially, having them not there is not helpful to the community.
Education of members from not town is very close to enforcement.
That's
Just
enforcement.
enforcement by
You're not
another name. but-
You're educating, you're
Yes.
not allowed to come here. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? Is-
I
Go
I have a
ahead.
quick question. Just with these people being on site at Harvey's, carrying out duties and whatnot, has anybody looked at the liability?
Yes. Yeah, we did talk with our insurance company.
How about Harvey's insurance, though?
Harvey's agreed, so I don't know specifically, what they worked out, but they agreed, and it's actually in our new contract that we're allowed to enforce on their property.
Okay.
Okay, my preference is to vote Article 2 as a block. Does anybody here object to that?
I object.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And do them one at a time?
Yeah,
Start with,
Make
do
it
do you
more
care
work
where
for
we
me.
start?
No.
Okay. McMahon, I move, we recommend the town vote to transfer $25,000 from Finance Department salary wages to Finance Department expense.
Bradley, second?
Bradley, thank you. Any further discussion? Comments? We're all here, so we can vote. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? No. 900. Okay.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to transfer $35,000 from Police Department salary wages to Police Department expenses.
Is there a second?
Bradley, second?
Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Everyone, nobody opposed, nobody abstaining, that's 900.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to transfer $48,250 from landfill expense to landfill salary wages.
Bradley, second?
Okay, any further discussion?
I'm not going to be voting in favor of this transfer. I think the program, while well-intentioned, I would like to see dedication put on other expenses and things that are happening throughout the town that this is distracting us from. This program is now hopefully going to save us money, but now immediately costing us money.
Will you go ahead?
Sorry, it's already money that's raised on the budget, so it would
It
would go
free
back to
cash.
free
In
cash.
fairness, it would go to free
Yeah,
cash.
absolutely.
Well, I would say that if you eliminate the full-time people, you're going to pay more this year because there's going to be more dumping. It's very clear. I don't know if you go there, but.
I did.
Okay.
I don't anymore now. I pay
Yeah,
for private.
okay. But It's dramatically different, like sort of a third the amount of trash kind of thing that's there. I mean,
When you say that, do you mean actual piles of trash there or traffic? Just to be
No,
clear,
no.
right? I mean, is it less
Traffic's
busy or
just as
there's
bad if you
actually
go on a
less?
Saturday, but, but the amount
Okay.
they're changing it, the amount they're filling up, and what's in the bins. Anyway, I really think, at least for this year, if not for this short, it would be very short-sighted not to. I actually think there's two big impacts here. One is the bags, which I think is getting people who never recycled and just threw stuff in the dumpster to recycle. But the enforcement part, when you see or hear some of the anecdotal stories, it sounds to me that that's a really huge part. So, anyway, anybody else have comments?
I just wanted to add comment that this time I think it's a need of the hour because we need to control who is dumping, who is allowed to dump. So definitely we need somebody to monitor. But I think going forward, maybe next year or so, this cannot, according to me, I feel that this cannot be a forever thing that you are paying for somebody to enforce it. I think the landfill company, in this case Harvey, should be responsible in some way. I understand there may be towns who are enforcing, but I would still want to have those conversations with them that this expenditure cannot go on from us forever. There has to be some way, like monitoring, making sure that people who are the right people to dump are the ones who are doing that. So for now it's fine, but I think we have to figure out ways in the upcoming fiscal year about maybe talking to them, negotiating or whatever, combining the folks who dump there from other towns as well, some creative way of sharing the expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. You know, certainly if we can, I think this is implementation of the program and it's working very well. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to think about it. I just do want to be really clear that we have tried to negotiate that and Harvey's unequivocally will not enforce. So sort of that's where we're at. And I think someone mentioned that the last time, which is true, we pay them per ton for waste. So
It's not in their interest.
Turning away
Yeah.
waste is not in their best interest.
Right. So, but
Yeah.
we should certainly continue to monitor the entire program. I completely agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, who knows, 3 or 4 years from now, maybe we're not even doing this and it's all pickup or something. I mean, there are other proposals, right? So
Yeah.
you have to see what's the most efficient or effective
Sure.
in the end. So.
I assume, Christy, at the end of the year, we'll be able to see sort of what our last year's tonnage would have cost us and what this year's, so that we can really see, right, did the reduction in tonnage pay for these positions?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, I would expect to give that to you as part of the fiscal 26 budget. So
Okay.
you could see sort of to date what we've done. I will tell you that it's already reflecting in our initial bills. There's significantly less tonnage. They've, you know, anecdotally, they're dumping those bins far less than they were before. But we've seen it in July and August, less tonnage than in the past. So.
Yeah, I think it would be important before the annual town meeting that
Yes.
we have
Yep.
that information
Yeah.
to know that it's the right path.
Right.
And because it'll set next year's budget too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You had mentioned signing the new contract potentially at the next select board meeting
Tomorrow.
tomorrow, yeah. Will that be the end of the Tidy Town tipping fees? So will that be like mid-year?
It will become
Okay.
effective when we sign it. So, so I think that is expected to end, yeah, with the signing of that new
Do we
contract.
know, I mean, can we segregate the tonnage from Tidy Town versus the landfill costs, so we can
Yeah,
actually
so
be comparing apples to apples?
they reported that to us previously, annualized, so, it's.
Okay, so we'll be able
yeah.
to back that number
Yeah.
out when we see the
Yeah.
savings, okay.
Absolutely.
Because I
Oh,
imagine
that's
that's
a
a
good
big
point.
savings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, it's a
Yep.
good point.
Okay. Everybody ready? Ready, in favor? 8 opposed, 1 abstain, none, 810. I got that. Okay, very good. All right, next, we don't need you to talk about the water department budget. We need
Okay.
you to speak to the fire department contract. Because those are new numbers too now in the warrant.
Yep, so this is, so within this article, and we might, within this article, there's $153,000 of free cash. Which is available funds, which is a retro payment for the first year of the contract because we've gone beyond that fiscal year now. And that represents, I'm trying to remember, if it's a 2 or 2.5% increase, and also an increase in stipends. Do you mind pulling up my office and getting the orange folder in my thing that says special town meeting? All right, I have I forgot to bring it up, sorry. And then we would amend the budget for fiscal '25 to reflect a $175,000 increase in salary and wages and a $9,600 increase for fire department expenses. The expenses is largely clothing allowance. And then the salary and wages again is paramedic EMT stipends as well as a COLA adjustment primarily.
Okay.
And this was
yeah, that makes sense.
done using current staff. So that's for fiscal '25, any of the changes, any of the turnover in the fire department has been recognized within that number.
Oh, so effectively, it's, this is recalculated to not just the increase, or it may be
Right.
less or more depending
Right.
on people left and
Right, so
lower
say
pay,
someone
yeah.
retired at
Yeah,
25
yeah.
years, and we
Right.
have a brand new person, it's calculated to acknowledge that employee without longevity, maybe at a lower step.
Okay, and we don't have the number yet, but yes, Andrew?
If I'm asking, did the contract have an impact on the changing the clothing allowance? Like, I'm surprised to see that $9,600 here, like, was there something in the contract that said we should give
Where's
more
that?
supplies, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that represents an increase to the clothing allowance in the second year.
Okay, thank you.
Which is
Now.
fiscal '25, correct?
We're in the
Yeah,
second.
we are
We're
in the second year today.
Right.
Just making sure.
Yeah, it'd be too late to buy clothes last year.
Right.
Used clothes.
It also represents the addition of Juneteenth as a holiday. I'm trying to remember it. John's going to bring it up for me, but that was also another change in the contract.
Christy, is
Huh?
the stipend for fire, is that the clothing, is that a stipend or is it a reimbursement?
Clothing for fire is a reimbursement, I believe. It's different for different unions, but. Okay, so I'll just start over. So it's a 2%, so now fiscal '24 was a 2% increase. And then fiscal '25 is a 2% increase. So in addition to that, the EMT stipends will increase by $1,500 over the life of the contract from $3,000 to $3,300. Nope. Yeah, $3,300 in fiscal '24, $3,700 in fiscal '25, and then $4,500 in fiscal '26. For the paramedic stipends, in fiscal '24, it went from $7,600 to $9,500, and in fiscal '25, it goes up to $10,000. And then the additional holiday pay for Juneteenth, there were some language changes. One of them was around tuition reimbursement that establishes dollar caps as opposed to the percentages that they currently get. And there's also language in there that if they voluntarily resign from employment within 2 years of the reimbursement, that there would be a look-back period to pay back. Then the clothing allowance increased by $100 each year of the contract.
And this clothing, isn't there like turnout gear? It's other stuff they need or something, right? Because
Yeah, so
we
they get-
provide that, I hope.
Yeah, they get,
The helmets and the boots and coats.
Yeah, they get turnout gear when they get started up. I think Chief Minardi talked a little bit about what they provide them to get a police officer started, and that's part of their change. So similarly, the fire department does.
Okay, any questions?
One question, so, and this may be completely a whack, so please feel free to correct me there. When I looked at the appropriation of last fiscal year, which was share, I see that there is around 83 or 85,000, which is available. Like the usage is less than 100%. So the total, if I calculate for the available budget, it comes up to around 85,000. Is that something goes back to the free cash, or that
Yeah.
something can be transferred directly as well to this?
So for last year,
For the fiscal 24,
yeah, so that would already close out to free cash.
That already
And
closed
that's
out.
where
And
we're
then it's
taking it
being
from.
paid out of free
Okay.
cash. So
We're taking it
essentially,
back
yeah.
from
And then
free
taking
cash.
it
Yeah.
back. Perfect, yep, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to clarify,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yeah, so 80-something of the 153 came directly from that budget.
From that
Yes,
savings
yes.
Perfect.
last
Got
year.
it. Thank you.
Any other? All right, how about a motion?
McMahon, I move the town vote to transfer $153,000 from free cash for retroactive payments to salary and wages, and raise and appropriate $175,000 for fiscal '25 fire department salary and wages, and $9,600 for fiscal '25 fire department expenses.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussion?
Okay, I just wanted to add that the number that we put up at the budget summit, the estimated tax increase, it was inclusive of these, of this
Oh.
additional raise and appropriate.
Oh, good, yeah, I mean, often you put, if everything at town meeting passes, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I just wanted to make sure that was
Okay.
clear.
Got it. It's good to be clear. Any further questions, discussions? All right, all in favor? Okay, none opposed, no one. So we have 900. So that one is done. Okay, the next big potato item here is Article 8.
So the amount in the warrant is $1,115,713. That's based on the fee proposals that we received from the existing architect
Skip the one.
and the current OPM. I will say that there's an additional $5,000 that I was made aware of today that we'd need to add to the article related to surveying. So this would likely come up to $1,120,713.
I'm sorry, can you say that number
Yeah,
again?
$1,120,713. So an additional $5,000 for surveying. So as I talked about, I think last time, the select board, we had talked about, I think from the beginning of coming to this town meeting, asking for the full design and construction for the community center. Sort of given where we're at with public engagement and design, the request now is to just come forward and request money for the design funding. We are anticipating use of the Pulte Stabilization Fund for this funding. We have one more meeting tomorrow with attorneys to confirm. But that stabilization fund has $3.4 million in it, and so the intent would be to move it, to fund it from that stabilization account.
And that's because it's benefits seniors
Right.
specifically?
Yep. So that stabilization account, when it was established by town meeting, was to benefit seniors through capital projects and or affordable housing. And the first 1.8 million that came into that stabilization account was transferred out to the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay. Should be lots of questions, I would guess.
So the design for this, will the results of the design be like what I think the golf club building is aiming to do, which is give some options, or will this be for whatever the plan is at the current time? In other words, will there be like, if you do this and this, it'll cost this.
Oh,
If you do
yes.
that and the
Yeah,
other
so
thing,
there'll be
it'll cost the other thing.
alternatives.
They'll-
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's,
So the intention would be to, so right now, if you look at the preferred design that we've been talking about at the public engagement sessions, there's sort of a scaled down design for the second floor, and then there's white space on the first floor that we've been saying, for future build.
Yeah.
I think that's been really confusing when we're talking to the community, because it's like, well, what is that going to be, and can we take more of that space for this? And so I think it's the attempt to create that design was to do some sort of phasing, but I think not understanding the vision, even if the vision is several years away, has been difficult. So this would be for full design of the building with an understanding of phasing of the construction, and then also alternatives,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I'm curious, and I think we've gone through this before in talking about the library and stuff, but you'll have to tell me. So the OPM pricing, is that based on sort of our expectation of scale of the total project, or isn't there some, like, is it a percentage?
It's typically a percentage, but for this project, we've received an actual fee proposal. So the design proposal that we received was about $995,000, and then the OPM was about $120,000.
So this isn't based on any sort of expectation of total project, it's just an
Yeah,
estimate for this particular.
for the design work.
Do we have an idea of what we're gonna propose this for, as a borrow or transfer free cash?
Yeah, so I was just saying that I believe it's going to be proposed to come out of the Pulte stabilization
So
account.
all of it from Post, I guess I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking the whole million would be, okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
that's what we're talking about right now. As I said, we have one more sort of check-in to confirm that.
Thank you, I apologize.
Rod?
So, I had two thoughts, which I've shared with Christie. She was nice enough to provide both the proposals for the OPM and the architect. And I thought the architect's proposal was difficult to evaluate just on a lump sum number. So for me to feel comfortable, I would want to see it broken down a little further. And that may just be me. The other is just, I'd like to see us design towards a budget. And right now, that budget's still in flux, and the numbers we've seen are pretty high. So I guess the two things I'd like to see is, one is the estimate of how they came to the current budget, what that number is at this point, so we all understand. And then two, what's the architectural fee associated with that?
So the current contract that we have right now is for schematic design. So there's a deliverable of the schematic design of the preferred design, which again is the design that's that we've been talking about at the public engagement sessions with the white space for future build out. Also, they would give us a breakdown. So I did forward Rod's comments. So part of it is expected that we would get anyway related to that specific schematic design. But in terms of a further breakdown of the fee proposal, they're able to provide that to us. I just don't have it right now.
I'm sorry, you say that you don't have it now, or you might have it later, or?
Yeah, I will have it.
Okay,
Yep.
all right,
Yep.
okay.
Just in terms of the second part of that about the budget, that was kind of what I was trying to get at with my question.
Yeah.
Will there be, when the design comes back, will there be multiple options at multiple budgets, I guess was what,
Price points.
Yeah.
price points, which
Yeah.
was kind of what I was looking
Yeah,
for.
I think
Is that the case? Do we
I
think?
I think that can work. I think
Okay.
that
But
that process needs to be managed.
But am
yeah.
I right that that's what is gonna come back, or is it not gonna come back that way?
I think that the difference between the golf club building project that you referenced and this one is
Yeah.
that there's, so we have the building, we have the shell.
No,
of the
I
building.
understand,
No, but, so I think some of the things that we've been sort of working through is, you know, do we want this, do we want an auditorium, do we want, you know, so I think that those cost proposals or alternatives are,
Yep.
what's the cost of an auditorium versus,
Right.
I don't know, making it up, like a pickleball court, or whatever
You know, I
it
get
is.
it, and,
So-
you know, the central stairway and extra elevator,
Right.
and, you know, there's all
Right.
sorts of things that,
Yeah, so I think those will be the alternatives.
Right,
is the
right.
use of, more about the use of the building and
Yep.
what those costs are associated
Yep.
with those uses.
and whether those are included or not, there'll be options on the budget.
Yeah.
So we're not locked into, with
So we're
this
doing this
design,
sort
a
of
single
build your own
budget.
adventure here. We're gonna design the shell, and then for another $1,000, you can have this, or for another $1 million, you can have another elevator. I mean, is that sort of,
I wouldn't characterize it that way, but, you know, I think one of the things that's challenging is that all the projects that have come before the town or come before all of you are pretty clear, right?
Yep.
A new fire station needs bays for fire trucks, and it needs bays for ambulances, and it needs some offices and some sleeping quarters. And, you know, maybe we'll get a heated apron or maybe we won't, and those are sort of the decisions that you make. And I think that's true with all of the municipal buildings. With a community center, it is really more of what the community wants it to be. So you could go to another community and it could be, you know, two completely different departments. You know, maybe the senior center is not even part of it. And so here, you know, when we purchased the building, we talked about the senior center being on the first floor and the rec center being on the second floor, and that's what we're moving forward with. But in terms of what specifically they're designed for is really up to the community, and I think we've been clear about that since the beginning. And so it is really sort of, you know, I think, do you want a second elevator because it's $1 million? And, or I can't remember, I think it was
That's right.
roughly that.
I made up that number. Just to-
You know, or do we, you know, do we want to, I can't, you know, there was like the whole like arts and crafts room and how we would fit that up, and, you know, how large, one of the biggest discussion points right now is how large is the largest multi-purpose room, and what do we want to do with that room? So I guess put simply, yeah, that's what it is. I think it's, you know, what is the cost of some of these wants, and what's an alternative that might be less than that?
You know, I think the opportunity is we don't have to wait till the full design's done to decide which way we're going. I mean, they'll have estimates along the way. Presumably, you get to a certain point and you decide, and then you finish the design for that portion of the work, which may be less than what they're anticipating right now.
I think
Yeah.
since we started, we've been talking about phasing, because, and I think that's, you know, that's likely, you know, that's what we've been talking about. So if we were to come to this town meeting for the full amount, even that preferred design was a first phase of the design. I think one of the things that we want to understand is what is the vision, so that we don't put an elevator in the middle of
The pool.
the pool. Yeah, absolutely. So, and then sort of work from there. But there's potential for, you know, once we sell the senior center, then that money becomes available. So then, you know, what portion of design or work is that going to fund? And then you can, you know, how are we going to move people within that? So.
It's one of the things I see with this project is I know there's a huge desire to push this through quickly, but I really have a hard time believing that by annual town meeting, this design work and selections will be done, and you'll have enough sort of biddable bids kind of things that I think that might be, especially since we're talking about all these options. I mean, a library repair project split itself into three for this very reason, was to do a 10% design, and now we're doing the full design. We'll have bids and go for construction. The whole idea that we would come even to this fall meeting and ask for a construction meeting for that, it seems impossible to me. That it would have been impossible anyway. I'd like to see us, because this is a big number, not push ourselves so quick that we don't have solid numbers and we don't have a chance to make some decisions on that too. I don't have problems with funding design, because I think that is the next phase. It's just, I'm a little concerned about the deliverable or the desire to have like a construction number in town meeting, which is only 5 or 6 months away. Having sat on the library committee and watching how things don't move at the speed of that we think.
Yeah.
And you
I
run
mean,
into things where you need to get approval of some outside organization on something, and
Right.
it can go on for months, so, anyway. I think
So with the notion of phasing, is there any risk that the plan amount that we're bidding on here becomes insufficient over time because something about the plans change?
Well, this would fund design.
Correct.
But I think, yeah, I mean, I think if what you're asking is, will the price go up? I mean, I think what we understand is that construction costs are they were escalating. I'm not sure what, what they're doing now. So there's potential that if, the way that we phase it is that what you're asking?
Well, no, I'm sorry I didn't ask it clearly. So this is obviously design work for a deliverable of number of pieces that we're planning to roll out in phases.
Mhm.
Are we expecting to go back with additional design work in 2 years because of, so this should
Well,
be,
this is what, based on what we have asked for, this is
Yep.
the fee that they have proposed, and we would sign a contract that would include what the deliverable was at the end of that contract, so.
And is the deliverable
The finished-
biddable prints from this, or the 10% schematic design? Because there
So-
was a huge difference.
Yep, so,
in that.
so it's through bid documents.
Bid documents, okay.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, Christie, I think it's bid documents for the preferred option.
Right.
The white spaces in some of those other areas, it's design development, which is, like half bid documents.
Yeah, that makes sense. At some point, you come out with the 10% estimate numbers. Some process selects what we're really going to do,
Right,
go out for real bid, and so you have hard construction numbers for the next phase.
yeah, I don't think it's.
That's
bid
the way I
documents.
think
I
it
don't-
would
I don't
happen.
think it's bid documents for the full fit out.
No, well, nor would it make sense to.
Not for a version that's not the preferred version?
So there's a preferred version right
No, I
now
understand,
that
yeah.
fits out 2/3 of the building.
Right.
There's another third that hasn't been decided.
Yeah.
I think the goal is to figure out the undecided area and bring that to a certain level, but not necessarily bid documents.
More like conceptual and estimated, so that you leave enough room for things, or
Right.
it's feasible to do it, right?
In the
Yeah.
future.
Clear as mud?
I mean, I'll just put it out there. I mean, my concern is I think the preferred option is too expensive, and I think it's gonna get voted down at town meeting when it comes. And so, if that's the case and we spend this money on that version and it's only good for that version, this is not money well spent.
So
In,
that's-
one person's opinion.
That's my whole
That's why I
hesitation here.
am saying, does this allow us to not put in the $1 million central staircase that people may not even want?
Right. That's totally my hesitation, right? Because I do think that the preferred option is,
Pricey.
being the nerdy accountant type I am, right? I calculated what that means for my tax bill, and I just can't, right? It's a very high price tag, and so you're right. Like I'm reluctant because I'm unclear that there's going to be value in this $1 million if we say $15 million is way too much, and we've invested another $1 million towards that. Like, I get it. That's my same reluctance.
Yeah. And, you've got to do what you've got to put forward, but that's my concern.
Right. You're right. At some point, you have to move forward, right? Like, we have to
Yeah.
do something, but are we doing something
You need to
$1
gather
million
enough.
towards a no vote?
But you also need to spend enough time designing so that you have the real information
Right.
of what the options were and what they'd really cost, which we don't have at the moment.
Right.
I mean, we have to, if we think the concept could work in any way, you'd still have to do some amount of design work.
Yes, some amount.
It's a question of how much.
Right, that's the question of how much.
And I think the
does this
question is,
get
do we
you-
think the scale of the current preferred version is so far off that this would be the wrong design? I guess would be sort of my thought process, right? Are we?
Yeah, I was hoping that, and maybe this is naive, I don't do design, that, you know, for this, we would get a design that if you said, hey, we need to cut the costs and pull out
Right.
these 5 elements, that the design would cover it, but I'm probably being naive on that one.
No, I think this could be done,
Well,
because
if
it's
the
sort of
contract
like
is for
different.
bid documents for the preferred option, then we don't get bid documents for the non-preferred option, right?
Well.
No,
what-
I think you're
yeah.
missing it.
Yeah.
You will have design of a whole bunch of different things and alternatives. Then you have to decide what you want. And that's when you go to make actual bid level documents. You don't go out and make those before, I don't think you
But
should,
that'll
anyway,
be-
before people decide what they want.
But
I don't-
Walt, my
yeah.
point is, that decision will be made before the town meeting vote is taken. Correct?
Before you vote for construction, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you won't really know what the,
Cost.
no, you'll know what the cost is, but you won't really know the town's, you know what I think, because I just told you.
You won't
But you
know
won't
what
know
people are
what
willing
the town thinks
to
until you
vote
take
for.
that vote at town meeting.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
we're going to spend $1 million, we're going to build a $15 million building, and everybody's going to say, oh, $8 was my, $8 million was my top, and we all
unless-
vote no.
Right.
Unless you go to annual town meeting with
I-
the information that we have
I
now,
get how it
and then
works.
have a vote on what you're gonna do for construction
I understand
costs.
how it works, I'm just,
No, I'm
Yep.
saying that there's no
Easy.
reason that you have to go to annual town meeting for construction costs. You could go to annual town meeting for finishing the design, because then you get approval of what the so-called design would be, and people would have numbers.
right.
Do you
but-
think that the conversation would be easier once we get the breakdowns that they owe us plus the one that Rod has requested?
Yeah, I think
For
the big
Rod.
problem.
I mean, it's not
For Rod.
hard to.
I think the big problem is as you
It's
pointed
abstract.
out, the lack of definition of exactly what we're building, and for some
Right.
people, we're building too much, and for some people, it'll probably be not building enough, I'm sure. And that,
Yeah, I'm just
it-
not sure how we are gonna get there
Right.
without investing some more time
Yeah.
and money.
Yeah.
I guess, though, what you were talking about, the library's approach, where they went with the 10% design documents to figure out, more general costs and what they wanted to do, I would be more comfortable with that. Again, I'm one person,
But
so I'm
isn't
not
You're
pretending
But
I'm
what
more
was-
than one
voting.
person. Right,
So-
I'm one person voting, but I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not, I
But
don't
isn't
speak
that
for anybody
partly
else.
what the process was with all the charrettes and people gathering for saying, hey, this is what we want?
No.
most of those did not have anybody
Dollars?
knowing how much things cost to
So it was
do.
just, that was wish list without dollars at all?
That's generally what happens
Yeah.
at those
Okay.
kind of things, because you
Yeah.
don't, I really want
Okay.
this auditorium,
Right.
but nobody knows at that second how much that
Right.
costs. You gotta
Right. And nothing
have some
gets cut out.
professional do
I
it.
mean,
Right.
if you say you want A and I say I want B and Walt says he wants C, A, B, and C all wind up in.
Not always, but
Well,
So
but I
far.
mean, that's kind of how that,
Unless C's really out of line,
right.
because you know Walter.
okay, A and B get in, C's out.
See, the
But,
problem in this building, you can fit A, B, and C.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah. Right.
yeah. I mean, I think it's hard, like, even looking at the preferred design, right? I mean, it is
Yeah.
a massive building, and you could put everybody's wish list in it.
Yep.
And the problem, and we said it when we first started talking about the dollar amount, like, I naively was shocked at the dollar amount.
Agreed.
But it's a massive building, and everybody's wish list can go in it. And so it's easy to say, well, we don't have to pick and choose whose priorities are the biggest priorities. We have space for all of them. In my opinion, we're gonna have to rein it in, and so,
Or phase it in.
to
Not
be
rated,
fair, I
phase it.
love the idea of phasing it in, because then anything is an option, but we're gonna have to pick the priorities, right?
Yep.
So what happens first?
And could
It's the
this-
same as we moved the rec center in now. the rec department didn't help, because there's stuff there, there's space they can
Yep.
use. I might sign my kid up on Thursday to drop him off for 4 days, for 4 hours when there's
4
more
days.
school.
I
That'd
think
be
you have
fun.
to
I'll
bring
take
them
him there
all.
for that
Sign
too.
them up for 4 days.
But you know,
Weekend.
and I think it's great, right? So we're phasing in. There's space that's usable, let's use it.
Right.
And I think that there is a much more, so to that end, I get that it is very hard to conceptualize this future build-out space if we just leave blank space. And it does make sense to have a whole plan so you don't put your elevator in your pool. So I get all of that. $1 million is a lot.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we're not spending $1 million committing ourselves to a $15 million plan that we're not necessarily going to want to execute. Right?
Right.
So we spend $1 million and then everybody says, oh, $15 million was too much. Are we going to spend $800,000 to do it again?
Right, I mean.
And that's my concern.
One of the questions I'd love to see is there a way to make a plan that comes out, and I mean, I am not an architect, I don't do these things, where, let's say we said as a town, we would spend $2 million a year on this building, and we would just gradually give ourselves the features at a much slower rate, but more affordable rate.
Not
Just thought
too
I'd
much.
throw it out
Probably
there.
not 2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know what
Right.
the right amount is, because this building seems like, I mean, I was not expecting to have to pay this much for the fit out. So, you know, the question is, how can we space it out over time to make it palatable? So people are like, yeah, I can handle that, you know, we'll do it each year.
And I think that that's exactly where the select board is. I mean, obviously we know that if we had come with to ask for $15 million to fit out this building, I think they weren't interested in doing that, but also we know that the town would not have been supportive of that. So I think that's what we've been looking at, is the phasing. The question is sort of what's the vision and the end goal, and how do we slowly get there in a responsible way? So we have, I think, about $7 million that we're anticipating coming through this Pulte stabilization fund over time. Right now it's at 3.4. We also, we've also are pursuing or looking at grant opportunities, because that's going to be our emergency shelter. So there's potentially grant opportunities that would fund like the generator and other things, like potentially pieces of the kitchen. I've talked to Senator Moore about getting in the process for, does this project fit into some sort of economic development grant in the future, because it would drive business into a
Downtown.
plaza and that plaza. So there are, and there's the selling of the senior center. So there's a lot of opportunity that's going to take time, and for that reason alone, it should be a phased project. And to Jane's point, we can use it right now, so we should use it right now, and that's what we're doing. But I think we're trying to understand the full vision for this building, and we can't do that without doing further design. And public engagement, I think that's a really important piece of what we haven't talked about yet related to this article request, is that it's further public engagement. So to your point, are we going to bring every single piece of it to town meeting? No. But the additional public engagement will allow people to weigh in on those things once they have those numbers attached to them.
So one of my observations, and I wanted to go back and double check the numbers, was that we talk about this sort of like the $15 million alternative. That's sort of the cost-effective version. But one of the things that jumped out at me about the estimate is about $5.5 million, maybe even more, has to do with stuff that's just table stakes, and that is the HVAC and the roof life cycle. So that's $5.5 million off the top if we just kept the building standing there and didn't want to turn it into the movie theater, No?
No, the HVAC and roof aren't included in that 15 million.
No, they are. Yeah.
They weren't last time I saw it.
That's what I remember seeing from a while
The
ago.
15 million price was the add-in, including debt service and design. It was like an 11 something,
Right.
15 all in, but it did not include the roof and the HVAC.
No, I don't think that's the case, because
All
we
right.
specifically talked about the roof as not being something that, once we fit out this whole building,
Right.
we asked for $15 million. We don't want to come back and ask for $2 million a couple of years later.
That would be embarrassing.
Or $5.5
Okay.
million. I mean, because that's what the two things are listed as. So I just wanted that to be part of the, and maybe there's more to be considered here, but like, to me, a third of this right off the top of what I remember the 15 million being is something that is just so that we can hang on to the building. Doesn't add a single bit of functionality, but it's just so we can keep the building working. So,
Well, I mean, we knew when we purchased the building that it was built in 2008. So we knew that there were going to be, and we had all the reports, building assessments, those were fully made public immediately. So we knew that there was going to be maintenance work, and
Yep.
I'm just throwing that out there.
no, and I know, I remember 8 million, 10 million being kind of the conversation, but I don't think that 10 million was thinking about it. So I don't know, that's where I'm squaring these numbers together, and it's not that surprising, although 5.5 million is kind of high, but like, what do I know about roofs?
Okay.
I just had a question. I'm not opposed to phasing. I think it's a great idea. I think it allows for flexibility and hopefully some financial palatability. In your opinion, when you say phase it, are you talking about 3 years, 5 years, 8 years? What would be the horizon you were thinking of?
I think that that's something that we would have to determine based on those funding sources that I was just mentioning. And then, what we're coming to the town with. I think there's total recognition that we have other building projects going on. So.
Well, that's one concern, but the other concern I have is the longer the horizon is, the less likely it is that those needs are going to be the same as what was designed.
Sure.
So, when you start hitting that 5-year mark, you're really looking at a very different, potentially demographic that would be coming in to use that facility. I mean, look at 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The needs would be very different than they are today.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that new people might be interested in doing sort of different activities within the building. I mean, we've had our senior center for 30 years, and we've been able to sort of pivot on exactly what's offered there, but the frame of the building has been able to be successful. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think that I'm not sure that it would be so significant that we would need a whole new design. I guess that's to be seen, but I don't
I mean,
think
I
so.
think if the design were flexible enough, that's all the more reason to phase it. So if it's not all built out and there is still unused space, and 5 years from now we have a dramatically different demographic and a need that we wouldn't have identified today, and there was still the ability to adapt and utilize space, all the better. But what to me that means is then we need a design and a plan that is adaptable enough to accommodate changing needs within our community, which in a building that size makes sense. We bought a massive building that we should be able to 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now modify and adapt to the current needs of our community, not
Fixed in place.
what we decide today is what
Well,
we need.
And I think that's been the commitment from the board and the message at the public engagement sessions is that these spaces are flexible. I mean, even when we're talking about an auditorium, we're talking about an auditorium where all of the seating could be sort of pushed to the side so you could use that space for, other things. So it is intended to be used for many purposes.
Okay.
I just sorry.
I'm just gonna kind of want to wrap this up because we're not voting this tonight. Obviously, we don't even know the funding source yet, but there'll be another select board meeting tomorrow night, which I'm sure this is on the agenda too, Christie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is quite possible we won't vote this until town meeting, maybe. Do you have something quick? Or
Yeah,
can
I think,
done with questions?
my question is really quick and maybe something which you may have already considered, which is, since we are talking about the money and the budget and the finances and how stuff will work, have we considered any kind of private sponsorships here as well while engaging in how to get the money?
So we don't currently have any sort of policy for sponsorship, but that's something that we've talked about a little bit internally, is that, do you sell naming rights to an
Yeah,
auditorium,
exactly,
if that's something that, so all of I don't think anything's off the table. We just have to look at that.
The Bradley Auditorium, I can see it now.
I already can't afford it. but-
My tax goes down, my local business gets encouraged, I would be pretty happy to have them sponsor some of the portions of maybe the design or the further phases. I would love that.
Okay, so that's an interesting idea. Okay, so I think we
Walter,
have
can I just,
Yeah.
sorry, one more minute? If you don't mind. So I like Rod's initial comment that we should be designing to a budget or towards a construction budget, and it seems like we have a couple of options already on the table with the, coming from the least or most economic option to a wish list, right? So I think I also like the phasing discussion and phasing approach. But when we do phasing approach, we start with a base scenario. So with the bare bones project of what it's going to take to operationalize this center and make it usable to seniors and so on and so on. So there is already a price tag. It's about 10 million or so for the least expensive option. Do we have already an estimate of or planned how we're going to fund this least expensive option, and what impact will it have to the tax rate? Because when I look at this article, funding 1 million for the design, I would like to understand what that means in the long run. Even if we go with the least expensive option, what that means down the line to my taxes and other people's taxes.
So
To put the context into this article.
yeah, so what I was saying is that we're proposing to use available funds for this, which does not have a tax impact.
Yep.
It will, because I think someone else will say it, is that means that money's not being used for other things, but it's coming from a stabilization fund that's very specific to fund senior capital projects or affordable housing. Affordable Housing Trust has $1.8 million of that funding source already, and they are actually have other dedicated funding coming from the project in a different way that has to be used for affordable housing. So I think we've always anticipated that this would be used for future senior needs. In terms of the full project and how that would be set up, that's some of the funding sources I just mentioned. So I think it's absolutely a fair question once we identify how much of the project would be general fund budget. So I don't have an answer for you.
Okay.
right now.
Anything else? Okay. So let's talk about the golf club.
So
Two big ones.
So the golf club building, so we did a feasibility study with BFE. They've given us an estimate for future design. Under procurement laws, we need to hire an OPM now that in order to move forward, and then we would enter into a design contract for design. So this is $450,000 is an estimate because we don't have an OPM on board and we have to go through the designer selection process. But this is based on, again, an estimate that BFE has provided to us. This project is can be appropriately funded through the enterprise fund. And so the enterprise fund can absorb this $450,000 as a borrow. One of the things that we talked about at Municipal Building Committee, and I'm sure Rod will have some additional comments when I'm finished, is in order to have the enterprise fund support this project completely, we would need to design to whatever number the enterprise fund could support. So currently, the enterprise fund fully covers the golf course. I think it has every year. I think in 1 year, we actually did ask the general fund to subsidize it, and then because it made so much money that year, we went back and we reversed that. There's about a little less than $100,000 a year on average that closes out to free cash, which means our revenues are higher than our expenses, and that, or not to free cash, to retained earnings. Right. And retained earnings is what we use to fund the capital, like the cart path repair that you see on the agenda or on the warrant. So what that means is the additional revenue for this would largely come from whatever the restaurant lease would be. So part of this $450,000 would engage a food service consultant through the architect to help us identify, what the income would likely be, and then we would sort of start to understand not only what we could expect for a lease, but also what portions of the restaurant we would allow the lessee to sort of fit up. So what level of shell would we provide to the lessee, then they would come in with equipment or, fit, whatever level of fit up. So that's something that we would work with the food service consultant to understand. Based on very preliminary understanding, the enterprise fund, it's a much lower number than what's currently being proposed in terms of a new building as to what the enterprise fund could sustain. The other thing that we haven't talked about and that we didn't do with the previous restaurant is revenue sharing. We did not do that with the Civic or any restaurant before that. Excuse me. So trying to understand that option and what that might look like. Though I think we were warned that, the more revenue sharing, maybe the lower the lease payment. So it could be the same. And then the other piece of it would be, if there was sort of function space, is there a fee that goes to the town? And then the food and beverage goes to the restaurant. But again, I don't think that that's a huge revenue source, And then ultimately we'll be reviewing our golf fees to understand, where we are in the market and also where we could be in the market based on if we did have a new building. So this money would get us through design, but also help us understand all of that related to bringing on a new restaurant. I know there were questions about what we did previously. So when the Civic was there and other restaurants before that, the lease payment actually went to the general fund, but it was less than $200 a year, a month, less than $200 a month under the previous lease. So the way that lease was structured was that there was a really high capital investment and then a very small lease payment. So in terms of, the impact of that, even the impact of not having that lease payment is pretty minimal because it was so low. I think there was a question about how this would impact taxes. If it was fully under the enterprise fund, then all of the revenue from the restaurant, however we structure that, would also go into the enterprise fund. So there would be no impact on taxes, and assuming that the cost of the building wasn't more than what the enterprise fund could support. So
that makes sense. And so it makes sense because in order to even hire this restaurant consultant or do more design work, the committee needs some amount of funds because you pretty much spent the little amount you had before.
There is some money left over, which I don't know if can be taken off this amount.
Oh, it could be taken. Yeah, we could reduce it by that amount, or it just closes back out to free cash. So we could structure the article to amend the appropriation of the $32,000 remaining in that article, or it just closes out to free cash and then.
I think it's cleaner to say it out loud, but close it out to free cash. I mean, it's more in keeping with what we've said about other things.
Yeah, actually, I should amend that. So
This
that article was funded partly by retained earnings and partly by free cash, so it would close out back to retained earnings and free cash.
And this one is debt from the golf club, so it is a different funding source. So if you were to take that remaining 32, you'd have to change the funding source here too, and it becomes significantly more complicated.
Yeah, the difference between what people complained about is that this would be for the exact purpose of the previous article and not we're taking something and building this instead, so.
Say that again?
The complaints in the past of using old articles on
Oh,
things
right.
was because they
Right,
weren't
right.
really the same thing that
Right,
people voted for.
Right.
The last time when we voted money to explore the golf thing, it's still the same. It
Yeah.
still is exploring the golf thing, so.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think
if the
that should
funding was
raise the same
it would make
objection.
sense to do it.
Right.
I agree.
Rod, you're our representative on the committee. I figured you might
Yeah,
wanna
no, I
make some
think-
comments.
I think Christie said it very well. The key is getting the revenue from the golf course and the restaurant to pay for it. Based on the numbers we've seen so far, I think we're all very concerned that it won't. And I think at some point, we need to decide, we may need to decide, is the amenity that's provided by having a restaurant and a function space something that is important enough to the town to provide further support? Interestingly enough, right now, the preferred design, which is a two-story option, is a golf club and a pubish, barish area to support the golf club. Theoretically, if we were just supporting the golf club, that's all we need. In addition to that, which is what came out of the initial study, was the request or need to have a restaurant that was similar to before, as well as a function room. So that is basically doubling the size of the golf club. That doubling of size is what I'm concerned that we won't be able to support. So then the question in my mind is, this is a beautiful building and a beautiful spot. It's a great for the whole town to take advantage, not just the golfers. Is that an important enough amenity with all the other things that we've got on that we may at some point need to, help make up whatever that difference is? But until, I think what we're talking about right now is, absolutely the right next step. And, if again, and this is my feeling similar to the center, the community center. If we get to halfway through design and it's not making sense, then you don't finish the design for something that doesn't make sense. You pivot and say, okay, we're just going to design the first floor of the golf club and go ahead. So, I think it's, in both cases, we need to pay attention to what's happening from now to the next meeting and make good decisions.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point. If a building that had the pro shop plus wherever the golf people have to sit to watch, to rent, whatever you guys do with stuff. And then,
It's not that complicated, Walter.
yeah, and then I'm told it needs to have at least a bar and some food or something to be successful. That's a big difference in the big restaurant and meeting space. But would that bar and restaurant contribute enough rent or income
Again,
to still pay for that?
I think that's the
It's the
analysis.
interesting
we need
part.
to make. My sense is it probably would.
So, yeah, and it does make some amount of sense. You have to put a little bit into this to get design work and consulting stuff. Anybody have?
So the plan for this 450 is to borrow most of it?
Mhm.
Would that be a
Borrow
short term?
all of it.
Borrow all of it, okay.
Yep. Yep.
But then the debt service would be on the golf club
Correct.
enterprise fund?
Yes.
So but the borrow would be on the town, right?
It would
It
be,
would be the same
it-
short-term borrow that we do for the other, anything else?
right, but it would be,
The money
it would be
come out of the
enterprise fund debt.
Understood.
Yeah, okay.
But in terms of the rates, and there would be no difference, right?
So
'Cause the
they're
golf
issuing
club
under the town's
enterprise-
authority, so
In
they're getting
other
It's
words-
the
under
town.
the,
Well,
it's under the town's
You
bond.
use our
rating.
credit rating for that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
I think
I
that's what
figured.
he's getting at, is the
Yeah.
issuing authority, so
Yeah,
our ready,
yeah.
rating our.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we've talked to, I don't know if you want to jump up, we've talked to bond counsel about using State House notes for this borrow.
Yeah, so bond counsel did have some concerns about the least factor of this and whether
For
or not
private
they,
use.
right, need to ultimately be
okay,
non-exempt bonds, in which case the recommendation generally was to use State House notes, so the rate is a little higher.
yeah.
But even with those estimates, it could be covered by the enterprise fund.
Yeah.
I
So
ran
is the
it with-
expectation this 450 would be done as a taxable, as a State House note for this initial 450? Is that correct?
Well, the State House notes aren't taxable. It's sort of a different program, is my understanding. I don't know a lot about them, other than the fact that they don't go through the same process because they're sort of underwritten differently, offered to local banks within the state. From what I understand, our State House notes what I was told would be attractive. And this is a reasonably small amount, but I ran it with the higher numbers, and it would be covered by the enterprise fund regardless. I tried to be very generous in that regard so that we don't catch ourselves after the fact. I don't wanna do that my
So
first
that,
year.
higher numbers are sort of 5%, 4%?
I ran it at 7.
Oh, 7, okay.
Yeah, again, I want it to be,
You don't
safe.
want to
Yeah,
get
you're
caught
very
with
safe.
that money, so it
Yeah.
may be, there might be upside there.
I'm still a rookie, I don't wanna,
Yeah.
So, would it be possible to use some of the golf club retained earnings so you didn't have to borrow at all?
So there's just under $600,000 in golf club retained earnings, so it would, so because we talked about using it for the full amount. And our position was to not do that and to go through the borrowing process and then have those funds available for other capital items. I mean, as we go forward, I suppose we could look at use of those retained earnings. It's just pretty limited. It's much different than free cash in terms of the level.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly look at that over time. I think initially to go forward with this, because our retained earnings aren't enormous and you don't want to expend them quickly in large chunks, it sort of undermines the idea behind retained earnings. For things that are capital and replacement items, that's what you need it for.
And we also are, depending on what we were saying, depending on the cost of the project, we put less than $100,000 into retained earnings per year, so we didn't want to deplete them down and then also have to deplete them going forward once we do a borrow.
And those notes, 20-year things, sort of, too?
No, the State House notes are short-term. We'd be able to roll
Okay.
it from year to
Okay.
year. So if at some point we went out to borrow for the larger project, we'd be able to roll this right into it. And I did have a conversation with them about the non-exempt bonds and the rates for that. And the rates for that are more attractive than State House notes and not so much, frankly, higher than the exempt bonds. So I was happy to hear that, so, at least in the current
And-
market.
So,
And just the explanation of why it's different is because it's not municipal use. The restaurant is not a municipal use sort of
might not
thing.
be.
It's because it'd be run by a private party. It'd be
Private party.
leasing or licensing it or any other manner to a private party.
But if it's also about timing, so if, say this project came to the annual town meeting at the same time as the library project, and both of those were approved, the percentage of that bond for this
Ah.
project would be important, related to whether or not you could use exempt bonds.
So for tax
Oh,
exempt
so
bonds,
you
the
could-
benefit of that bond, so the person it's a question about the benefit of the bond, and essentially the entity that issued the bond has to be the user of the property. And if someone else is benefiting from the use of the property, it's called bad use. You can have a 10% as a municipality, meaning you could, in theory, lease out 10% of that building and have that be bad use. Or, to Christie's point, if you issued a larger bond and financed multiple projects, 10% of the total over the bond could be bad use. So if you were
Right.
to use these short-term bonds in the meantime to roll it forward into a larger issue, then you could get the benefit of the lower rate on an exempt bond.
And we may have other projects that are coming forward. You never know what's coming.
We
John, we hope to know what's coming.
I think that's why we're all here.
Yeah. That's
So,
where-
so even though this is all short-term, this is still a 2/3 vote at town meeting, right?
It would be if it's a borrow.
Because it's a borrow.
Even though,
Yeah.
even though it's small and short-term.
It's not the size.
Relative.
Yeah, no, I know, I just.
All relative.
Yeah,
It's a borrow.
yeah, just making sure I got that right.
But sometimes, some of these things, borrowing makes sense in that you spread the cost out over more years of more people using it versus the instantaneous now, when this building, if rebuilt, I assume would be 40 years or something of use, so. Right. It is insane.
So maybe a basic question. I'm going to play the new guy card for a little bit here, and maybe for people who are watching us, they may find it useful as well. So maybe a basic question: why do we need a restaurant, and what happens if we don't build one? And I'm putting in the context that we used to have a restaurant on the golf course that didn't have any economic benefit to the town. at least direct economic benefit because the lease payments were negligible. And we don't know what the lease payments and what economic benefit of that new restaurant will be to the town. So why do we need it?
I wouldn't say that we need it. We had a golf building reuse committee or use committee that did some public outreach, and people were supportive of that. So that was the program for the building that was given to the municipal building committee, was a golf pro shop with a restaurant. I think to Rod's point, as we're running those numbers, if it's not feasible to have the same level of restaurant that we had previously, then I think we would scale that down.
But can we, so I understand that this 450 is for design and hiring a consultant to figure out what the revenues we can generate from the restaurant. But can't we run, so first of all, can we decouple the two and do the analysis, build a business plan before we start investing in the design and construction of the
Hire a certain food service consultant.
if we need to, because on the other hand, we can look at what are the leases of similar restaurants, how much people pay to lease buildings for the restaurants, and we can derive from that what would be potential economic benefit to the town by leasing the restaurant.
So the food service consultant would actually be a subcontractor of the architect, because they're working together to identify exactly what the restaurant looks like and be able to develop the pro forma, so to understand exactly what they could get from a lease. That's how it was described to us when we met with them last week. So it does go those two sort of explorations, I guess, go hand in hand, and understanding exactly what kind of restaurant we're offering to understand what lease payment we would get, and then also determining what level of restaurant we're building to determine what sort of capital investment a restaurateur would need to put into it. I should have added to your first question that that golf building use committee did meet with folks from other golf courses that were municipally owned and privately owned. And there is an attraction of having food service, but we might not be able to offer it at the same level as we did before.
And maybe final question on this one: can, again, playing a new guy card, can the retained earnings be funneled back into the town for the use, or they have to stay for the operations of the golf course?
They have to stay within the enterprise fund, so stay within the golf course operations.
So there's no benefit to Westborough town people from the operation of the golf course, except for participation in the golf activities.
Right. And that's also how, so we have 4 enterprise funds. So we have the golf course one, we have water, and then we have sewer, and then
stormwater.
We have now stormwater. Yeah. And so it's the same with all of those, is that any revenue generated goes back into paying the costs of those.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I was curious here about the prospect of looking at a P3, because I think that there's potential that somebody else who is in the business of building and running restaurants could do that design work. And so my question, if we were to go down that road, I would assume we would do that prior to spending $450,000 on design, right? We would let somebody come in, or 3 somebodies come in and say, this is what we could do. Have we explored that option? I mean, is there a reason why we're not?
So we did look at it. So there's I think it's a 4-pronged test in terms of identifying, what level the public partner, so us, would have in level of design. And so one of the things I think that we've understood is that there's a high level of concern for that property and what sort of the aesthetic will be in terms of how it fits into the rest of the street. And if the town were to partner with a private entity, we would lose a lot of control, except for site plan, over that. So, and we would also, before we identified that partner, we would need to go out to bid, which we certainly could do, and that's what we talked about at the municipal building committee, but ultimately decided that we wanted to work with a restaurant consultant initially before going out to bid for that partner.
And is that beneficial because a private person could build a building not for less money than a municipality?
They could,
Yeah.
assuming that it passes that test,
Ah.
and a big portion of that test is how much influence or direction the municipality has over the project.
Got it. Because, yeah,
Because there's also the opportunity for a land lease, which we would lose total control of what the project looked like.
got it.
Well, not necessarily, right? So I'm not a great expert in them. I've awarded one, but in the time we did it, we had 3 different companies that came in and gave us a proposal, and they said, here's the building we're gonna build. Here's a schematic design, right? I mean, it's not, but here's what we think it's gonna look like, and that was part of our selection process, right? So if you have multiple companies come in and say, this is what we think we would build, here's how we would build it, this is what it would look like and how it would operate,
Sure.
then that's part of your award, and you pick the person who is designed to build, and you say, here are our requirements. It has to be this big, white, pretty building that looks like the one we have, and beyond that, you figure out how to make it work. I mean, I think those can be part of your bid process,
I think there's.
or at least it was in, like I said, the one time I've done it,
Yeah.
because I'm a seasoned expert.
So Christie, just so I understand, if we were to complete the design to the level we're talking about, and then put it out to private partnership, are we saying that we have too much influence for it to be, that would be?
It would just depend on there's a lot of detail there in terms of what that person would do. Like, if we're just building the shell, there's, which is what we were talking about at the municipal building committee, there's, we would go out to lease, and then we would have specifics of like what they could do in it, and certainly we wouldn't want them to build it to be very specific to their restaurant, and then they would fit that out. For where I was headed. So we could do a land lease, and but the requirements that you put within that RFP still need to pass that test as to whether or not it's a publicly procured project.
In this case, would we generate tax revenue from the operations of the restaurant for the town?
We'd still
Well,
own
you
the
have
land.
meals
Yeah, we would
tax.
still own land, so we would get a lease, and then we would have to sublet a portion of the building for the golf pro shop.
But we do get meals tax.
We get meals
from
tax,
all
yep.
restaurants.
Yep.
Okay, Rod, when is, or you would know too,
ahead.
because you're on the committee, but when is the next, your next committee
Yeah,
meeting?
not until a while from now,
That's 16.
17th.
17th, so we can, I don't know, I feel like maybe we have to digest this at least and talk about it again at the next meeting or something, but we're not gonna get more information before town meeting, in essence. Because the town meeting's the 21st, so.
Right.
True, okay. And when will that committee have a presentation or something? I mean, what they're gonna show at town meeting?
Yeah. Yep. They'll present to town meeting.
But would they have that, or you're gonna have to
I
wait
think
till
that they
after
would
the
come to
17th?
you, if you ask them to come.
Well, we only have 2 more meetings, so if
Yeah.
someone wants to come.
The design team expects to finish their work up this week.
Okay.
For the
Then
feasibility
maybe you can
study.
see if somebody wants to come back.
I mean, it'd
Would-
be, yeah.
Either the
I mean,
10th
and,
or 7th. Those are our next 2 meetings. Next Monday and the Thursday after. We have to be done by then, at least. But we don't have to vote before the R&R's done anyway, but those are the days we'd have the information. Okay, so I suggest,
Are others uncomfortable about voting without additional information? And if so,
Yeah,
what kind of
well,
information are
good
you looking
question.
for? I
Right.
see you are,
I'm not that uncomfortable, I just
Okay.
got the sense that people were still mulling it around in their
no,
brain, but maybe I'm
I'm
wrong.
okay with waiting, I think it makes
Yeah.
sense to, but I'm not uncomfortable that there's no more information forthcoming before we vote. But it seems like you are. That's why I was just asking if others
I was speaking more for what I perceive to be the group, so it isn't, your question is excellent, because I'd like to
Okay.
hear other people's opinion on that. Good.
were. Anyone?
You guys ready? Is anybody not ready to vote? Okay, so we might as well vote. We can re-vote if we want.
Well, I'm
Or
okay,
do we
I'm
want
okay
to-
waiting till then, you know, giving
Okay.
time to digest and
All
think
right,
about it. But there's
Monday.
no additional questions I need answered to vote, is what, you know,
No.
all I'm saying. And
I
if
mean-
others had questions, we
Yeah,
could
my
give them to
thought
Rod
on
now and
is
have
in
him
line
break it
that,
down,
having watched that committee on Westborough TV as a plug, but,
Yep.
that, they need some amount of money to move to the next step, and they're very judicious in how
Yep.
they use it, so I'm comfortable with this, because if they didn't think, if they
And-
think it didn't make sense, they
And we're
wouldn't
not
necessarily
affecting
spend
the
money.
tax rate because it's coming out of the enterprise fund,
Yeah,
essentially.
I still like it making sense to spend the money.
Yes. Yes,
But you're right,
but,
Yeah.
Until they can't make their debt service payments.
right.
exactly. Okay, so let's plan on doing that next time. So, next up is, there are two more articles that we still have to vote. We're waiting, the planning board is meeting on October 1st, which is tomorrow, I believe. And then there'll be changes to the bylaw, and maybe we'll hear anything about the B-Walt easement. It's now down to just the one property that wasn't done. So anyway, I would wait on both those. So next, in our state of things, if anybody has any feedback, or, we just came out of our budget summit, you have the finance people here and the town manager, and if you had any feedback on that you want to do, or we can do that down the road another day. But I didn't know if you had any immediate, anybody.
I mean, I'll just say, I felt like you heard everything we were saying and incorporated it
Great.
as best you could, and I thought you guys did a great job. I thought it was really helpful.
Thanks.
Because we asked for things that aren't really possible, so. So I appreciate all the work you did to,
Thanks.
you know, do what you were able to
To
do.
accommodate our
To
crazy
accommodate,
requests.
yeah, the impossible requests.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more informative than the past ones that
I
have
think so.
gone to, and I think it's working our way there.
Yeah, I would ask, because from the last 20 minutes of the conversation, or 30 minutes, like, is anything being done differently to approach the idea of how can we spend less potentially, or what services would we assess on a value curve better potentially? So is anything being done differently?
Since Thursday?
Not since Thursday, obviously, presumably planning forward as we're gonna go ahead looking at next year, so.
We actually met today, as internally, just to kick off the budget season for next year. So, I think one of the messages that we've sent out, which is different from what you're saying, is that, we don't anticipate having a lot of new and different, we don't anticipate having new positions. We don't anticipate, I don't hear any new programs coming. I think that we've had some great support from the community in terms of our growth. We had not added staff in many, many, many years, and the community has supported that over a few years, and I think that we're in a good place. But I don't feel like the discussion between this committee and the school committee or select board yielded any sort of next steps, except for the concern that I think we all share, which is the increases that we've experienced over the last few years. So, we're going to send it out to the department heads, and we're going to have those conversations with them in the coming weeks, like we always do, which critically looks at the budget. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, unless I'm missing something, I'm not sure that anything was asked specifically, except to sort of spread the message that the increases have been.
I think Shelby made a pitch for, like, asking the question about value, like how can we enumerate, what would it look like to lose money? What were the kinds of things we would consider, like, that would come off as the lowest priority for the value that we give our community?
I guess I didn't take that as staff making decisions about values and priorities as much as talking with the community and providing opportunity for that feedback. So
So there's plans to talk to the community.
I mean, again, it was Thursday and today's Monday, so I don't know, we don't have a specific plan based on that conversation currently.
Her suggestion was that we hold public hearings.
Yes,
Was actually her suggestion, not that the town do.
right. Advisory Finance Committee.
Yeah.
So she also suggested that each of the different budget department heads could show what would a 1% or a 5%, what were the kinds of things that would be on the chopping block. That has nothing to do with hearings, right? That's a direct
Oh, yeah.
recommendation to the department heads, but obviously it was just one of many things discussed.
So I sort of had a
I remember that.
conversation with Shelby and Patrick following the meeting, sort of along those lines. And the idea was, how would we present that to the public? And I think that really was her thought. And I agree, right? And the idea is that if we are really going to make a budget reduction, it's going to come with a reduction in services. And that's something that people have to weigh in on. And they would have to really be able to see what that option looks like and make educated decisions. And I think we had a little bit more general conversation about what would an avenue to propose something like that look like, right? Because I don't think, that's not a decision that any of us, I think, could make for the town. And so I jokingly say, what would it look like if we didn't have fire trucks, right? To use sort of a dramatic, but that, or what, and so we're gonna rely only on mutual aid and your response time is now 7 minutes while your house is on fire, or whatever the case may be. That's something that people would need to see and engage in really a conversation about priorities. And I think that was sort of her point, and our thought is, and again, not a specific plan for how we would do something, but a more general conversation about how could you engage the public in that sort of dialogue to really understand and make educated decisions. Because I don't think you could expect Chief Purcell to say, well, 7 minutes is fine while my house is on fire.
But
And so I think if that was the direction we would want to go, I think then the conversation might be for us in having, could we facilitate that sort of conversation, right? Is that our role? And is that something that we would want to look at? How could we facilitate that sort of conversation going forward? Because I think it's going to require a lot more community engagement than the 9 of us, or the 5 select board members, or however many department heads we have, 6-ish? So.
A lot more than 6, but it
Dozen.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I get your point.
I think all of that being true, then something should get started, if not in 3 days, true enough, but what happened in that room doesn't just leave that room and be like, okay, that was interesting, and then we go ahead with business as usual. That at some point we're having the conversation about what we should do, whether it's us or other people, or what would the medium be. Like that the reason we started talking about this 2 months ago is so that we could start building to having these things. And I thought the conversation a couple of days ago was really, really good, but that can't be the end. It has to be like, what are we kicking off to keep this going? Like
Right.
just even building the mentality to think about that is something that's different, that I haven't seen before, so. Okay, I've said my piece, thank you.
Anybody else? Rod?
I guess the only thing that because I asked the question, the synergies between the school board and the town, and you referred to a study that was done 10 years ago or something?
Yeah.
Is there anything in that study that's worth re-looking at?
I think that was the sort of basis of the conversation that Patrick alluded to. So Patrick and Ian met with Steve Durrett and Sarah Shamsuddin about sort of revisiting that conversation. The study is available. I'm happy to share it with all of you. My memory is that it was really focused on full consolidation of departments. I think there's probably many opportunities that might not be full consolidation of departments, but I can share that out with all of you.
I think my only feedback from that summit meeting was a couple of things. I just saw emergency management that I think was budgeted as 0 for the rest of the period as well. Is that something which is typical where we budget $0 for the emergency management, or do we anticipate some things and we should actually keep aside some money for emergency management? So that was one question I had.
I can answer that. So that was just related to capital. And so police and fire still submit their capital request. Last year was the first year we called it emergency management because it was the access control and the cameras for the town hall. And so we've just started that. So I think, I don't know what will come, but it would be in the form of requests, similar to all the other capital items.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that, it's not really like we budget aside some money in case something comes up and we need
it's a
money.
capital
It's
request.
a capital
Yeah.
request, got it. And the other thing was, are we looking at the next budget and also looking at some of the unused budgets as well? Because there were a lot of line items when we saw, and thanks to you for sharing the whole appropriation in Excel. The beauty of it is that now you look deep down into like, okay, what are the unused line items? What are the overused line items? And I could see that it's not really like every department has got everything used and every department has got everything unused. It's like some areas where it's unused and used. So is that something which is forming part of your strategy for next budget?
Yeah, so we always look at that. We always look at the previous expenditure, and we even go back and look at the year before to see, to start to see if there are patterns. So some of them are easily explained, and an easy one for me to highlight right now would be the finance department. We had all the transition, and so we can explain why there might be salary and wages left over, as an example. But some of them, that aren't as clear, we certainly dig into that. And we always look at when there's money left in an unexpended line, why was that, or what's really the need going forward.
Right, exactly. So I know I don't want to dig into every line item, but like example is like I saw a couple of overtimes, like there were 400% plus overtimes on fire and ambulance. So do you have those questions with them as well in terms of how come suddenly there's a big jump in the overtimes for?
Yeah, we do have all of those discussions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's why ambulance revenues were up 10% last year.
One of the things that we want to do this year for fiscal 26, which we haven't done in the past, is when the department heads submit their budgets to us, they fill out what we call an expense ledger. So it explains each one of their line items and what they're used for. And so we're going to incorporate that this year into the budget book so that you can all see it more clearly. So hopefully that's helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? And I sent you a note today, John, that we're going to need stuff for the book pretty soon, sooner than I would hope. The numbers that we put in our R&R have to be generated by the finance director. So
You mean you can't just make them up?
I can, but that's not usually a good thing to do. I think it's better if John makes them up. He has at least a basis in fact for, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's all we have you on the hook for tonight, unless you know of something else.
Oh, well, I did put in the email that the select board is going to talk about adding one more article tomorrow night.
Oh, right. Yes, you might want to talk
which
about
is
that.
the compensation study. So one of the things we did a full classification and compensation study for our non-union employees back in 2017, and then in the fall it yielded some adjustments in each of those positions. A lot has changed in the market, and related to, since 2018 when we made those adjustments. We're not looking to fund a full classification and compensation study, just compensation, because we have used sort of the tools and the methods that were established back in 2018 to identify where people's position or certain positions should be on the classification plan. Our methodology for moving folks back in 2018 and has been since then is that when we do reevaluate someone's position, our typical move is to move them to the closest step into that new salary range so that it's not a huge impact, and then they would just continue on steps to the end of that salary schedule. So when we negotiate with unions, we look at the market for all of them. So we look at surrounding communities, we look at our dashboard communities, and then that's also true for individual employment contracts. But But we have not done a compensation study for non-union since back in 2017. So the market is really tight. If you sort of look around at some of our neighboring communities, we have a lot of great people here who we don't want them looking around. So I think there's what we're finding is, especially when there's a vacancy, we're sort of looking at the salary, and we don't want to change things in a one-off way. We want to look at it holistically, and we want to make sure that we're attracting good candidates and also retaining quality employees. So we did get a couple different quotes. So this one would be $9,000 for the compensation. It would be recommended to come out of available funds, and it would just do salary. It would look at salary schedules for all the non-union positions. I think there's 42 altogether, mostly department heads. And
I was way off with 6.
I think you're thinking of our leadership team.
That's really what I was
Yeah.
So,
Our senior leadership team.
so the, police, fire, DPW, and clerical, I know of as unions, so are, say, library people in a union, or is that part of clerical? Or
The majority of the library are in the clerical union. All the full-time are in the clerical union.
So,
But the heads of all those.
but the heads of departments would be non-union? but-
Correct. There's some assistants that are non-union. Our
Okay.
assistant town accountant's non-union, our chief procurement officer, all of our department heads, our assistant DPW director, their water operations manager, all of our town
Oh, okay.
engineers are non-union.
That makes sense. Okay. So it's allotted as supervisory staff out,
Right.
got it.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense to me. You want to know that whether you're competitive or not, right?
Right.
Okay, so that will be in the warrant that the select,
So
People
yeah, so the
vote
board
on
will
tomorrow
decide if they
night?
want to add it to the warrant, and but that's what it would be. It's $9,000.
Okay. and tomorrow night, in theory, we're closing the warrant.
In reality, we're closing the
close the
warrant.
warrant.
'Cause we
Just
need
what's
to.
on it.
Yeah.
So just one comment
Yeah.
relative to that. Dashboard communities is a sensitive subject, so I don't know if the study is going to use our current dashboard communities or surrounding communities. Or
The study will look at comparable communities using that company's methods. So which is what we used before in 2018. We actually, so when we did it before, the communities that were chosen were considered for inclusion in the dashboard communities, but we would not limit it to dashboard communities. We
So
would look
you'd
at our
use their
surrounding
communities.
communities. We're looking at our market. So our market is typically folks in communities in our region where someone might travel to.
Where you could commute to or from.
Right.
So on that subject, is that still something that we could look at in the next year or something?
Yeah, it's
I
something
know
that's
that
definitely on
changing
the list.
superintendents kind of
Yeah.
also took us off that a bit, but.
Yeah.
Can you
I
tell us
think-
if we were to look at those dashboard communities, what would that process look like? Or do we know? So we've established them once, is that correct? And they've been the same since then. So do we have a process for reevaluating them, or do you know?
We don't have no, because we established them once, back in 2018, 19, and we haven't looked at them since. So I think what we wanted to do was get finance director in place and superintendent, and then have the conversation about how we want to approach it. Because the way that it was done before was mostly our finance team working on it. But I think there's a lot of lessons learned that I think I've talked to all of you about in
Yeah.
terms of just making it more clear as to why we're even choosing the communities we're choosing and how they compare to us. And
Rod sent me an interesting document that was the Worcester's version of explanation of their budget, and their comparison communities in there, to me, were absolutely shocking, because they were all the little tiny towns in central Mass, like Grafton, Westborough, all these little towns here, instead of like really, they're more comparable, of course, to something like Springfield or Lowell or Chicopee or
But I
Cambridge
wonder
or
if it's
something.
because there's
And-
only so many comparable
But they did the
community-
ones that were just next to them, which
Yeah,
was
I
kind of
mean,
really interesting, but
It's interesting because it's
big
there's-
elephant.
Yeah, it's
surrounded by mice.
population, it's geography.
It's a city government.
Yeah, it's all different
Yeah.
sorts of things.
So I found that fascinating, but it kind of tickled me because we've been talking about dashboard communities and
And we
yeah,
never
that one
considered-
didn't even make
What-
make
what's the one
sense.
that
They
goes?
didn't even list it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so we got to put Worcester in ours just to return the favor.
Closes for all possible snow days, whether it snows or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. So next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about our R&R.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, and thank you for both of you for coming.
I don't think you meant to, but when you send out the materials for this meeting, you sent out last year's R&R.
I think he's
I did.
proposing we just change the date.
No. I sent out this year's comment and last year's R&R because, first of all, some of our members weren't on the board last year.
Yeah.
And second of all, if you wanted to remember what was in it last year, so
Okay.
you might comment on what should be in it this year.
Oh, for the comments.
Obviously, the R&R isn't done yet, so I can't
Right.
send out this year's R&R.
Right, okay, fine.
Why isn't
And
it
it-
done yet? Well, get it together.
It's pretty close. I'm just about, unfortunately, I still have double spaces after my dots, and so I got to fix those before Andrew reads it. But,
Obviously.
I'll get there eventually. I just want to bring this up. Comments and votes on articles. I think this is it. Just make sure I got the right year for this one. Okay, see if I can share this. Where's Zoom? Share. I think I did it. Yes. Okay. So I just want to zip through these because we got to start processing these. Particularly the ones where we had a couple dissenters. I wanted to make sure I did that wrong. Okay. So Article 2, I'm going to put in that, no, this is the wrong one, sorry. That's annual town meeting. You got to pull out the other one. Now that, in that case, I did pull out the, there we go. Okay. Prior year bills, we're just going to leave this as a non-voted. So we expect the motion to be passed over. That's what we did last October, and that makes sense. I don't think we should bother voting. Budget adjustments, we just did tonight, so that's not it.
That's not the statement.
I guess, I don't know. We did have a dissent. So here's a question for Josh. Is what would you like it to say of why you wouldn't have voted for that? At the Article 2 line, because I'll have to separate it out into the three things now,
The
but
landfill expense salary to wage.
Can I think on it?
you can think on it,
Or
just
send it.
send me something, would be great.
I don't
Perfect.
love the committee statement either, and I apologize, I'm looking at this for the first time right now.
Well, then
Can
you-
I also send you
Which one? don't you
proposed
like?
changes? Just we voted to recommend it because the budget makes sense, because the changes to the budget make sense. I just don't like that statement.
Oh,
I
fine.
don't like the
I'm happy with
phrasing.
anybody
Yeah.
sending me anything.
And again, I'm
But
looking at
I
it
will tell
for the
you-
very first time this
I'm
second.
just gonna
I
tell
am
you,
too,
last year I got a lot
I
of
know.
input a day or two before they were due, and I'm not doing that this year.
Understood, I will try to get it
So,
to you, yeah.
You have
Yeah, yeah,
Thursday off this week, in theory, from this meeting anyway,
Well, not all of us.
not all of us. But
All of us have it
Anyway.
from this meeting.
send me stuff during the week. This week is fine. And that's why I send it out early, to get people to
Yeah,
start
yeah, no,
thinking, because I just make
yeah.
stuff up. Okay, same as 3, there's no dissent, but yeah, why don't, if everybody wants to go through them, send me stuff. It gets a little confusing because people have different things, so I'll have to consolidate them and then we can discuss them next time.
That sounds good to me.
The only ones I wanted to.
better than it makes sense?
Does what? Yeah,
I'd
makes
rather
sense.
think about it when it's not 9 o'clock on a Monday.
Okay. And the ones I wanted particularly to look at is Article 15, because two of you voted against it, and I wanted to make sure that I captured your essence. And there was another one that had a less than full vote, but I'm not seeing it here. Oh, because there's more. Article 17 also. Okay, so if you guys could look at that and send me feedback, that's fine. Meanwhile, I'll throw in stuff for this one. I'll just say it makes sense, and then it'll be done. Okay. Next thing is the R&R book. It starts off with the first 2 pages are John Arnold's, and we don't write that part. He does, so I'll let him review his own. The next is really the message to voters. My intent right now is by next meeting I will send out a draft, depending on when I get the new numbers from John, whether I can update these. I started doing this already, but I am, so my intent would be to have a basic message of what we've done, what we see coming up, because this is our chance. This is the midpoint where you now can compare what was told to us at annual town meeting. You know, the tax rate was going to be $800-something, and now it's $690 or something. It's down or whatever. Have those in there, and then we have to decide what other points we want to bring up. Typically, we've thrown in the cost of borrowing in these, and then a look ahead at the annual town meeting. And I think we could talk a little bit about how we've started a process a little earlier this year with the hope of getting somewhere, whether or not we do, and see where we get.
In our statement, is there something that you can put in about the fact that because I'm not completely on the side of this, so I want to be careful how I word it, but that we're trying to look ahead at what, and figure out how to get community input about what services the community feels like it doesn't need, to the point that we could save money in the budget, given the cost of everything is going up and people don't like paying for things. But we aren't seeing, I should say, I want to be careful how I say this, but it isn't obvious what is the low-hanging fruit that the town is okay with losing.
Just probably because there is no low-hanging fruit.
Well,
Your
yeah,
choices are having, larger class size, or having less of a service for something or another,
Exactly.
right?
Right, but to throw that in there
Yeah.
somehow, that if you have community input, suggestions, or ideas, please share them with us, because our job as a committee is to try and come up with a reasonable budget for the town. And I feel like, I've been on here for a while, I don't think we're particularly wasteful or not thoughtful, and yet it's not, there isn't obvious stuff. Okay, maybe the $4,500 for restocking Sandra Pond is optional, but that there's a committee of people out there that really enjoy fishing. Everything has a proponent as far as we know, and the fact that I don't necessarily think I'm ever going to go touch a fish does not mean you don't want to.
Sure.
So perhaps the way to address that in the message is to maybe suggest that the committee has heard from a number of people that there is a desire to control the growth of the budget growth or spending, however you want to say it, in the town, and that, we're actively engaged with the town manager, the school board, the select board in trying to, you know, figure out ways to reduce either the increase or the overall spend or whatever, and that we would be open to more community
Engagement?
engagement or ideas. I don't know, some, you know, again,
Because,
it's late and I drove a lot of hours.
right,
But
because,
something like that, rather than starting with, you know, what services do you want to cut? Because they come to town meeting and over again say, we do not want to cut services. We
which,
want to
right,
add them.
I'm on that side of the
Right.
line, so that's why this is
Yeah.
really hard for me. But it's like, but I do understand that there are people who are like,
Yep.
this is pushing me over the edge,
Yep.
and yet they don't want the fire truck to take 7 minutes longer, or the ambulance to take 2 minutes longer, or, you know, or the school to not educate or bus kids, or, you know, like, so, you know, hi, I've been volunteering in this position for a long time, and I am not seeing something where I can go, oh, man, we just really have to cut that. And I mean, like, even,
I mean, that's
Then-
what Andrew said to start us off months ago. It was like, you know, we've been doing this a long time, and you don't find the $1 million low-hanging fruit that go, aha,
Yeah.
cut that. So it is more,
Central staircase.
you have to look at what you said,
Yeah.
which was, is there
It's
a
$1 million.
percent method to do?
Well, and
That's
frankly,
like
community
come
feedback is a red herring. Like, it's a red herring. We know more about the town than most people. So the idea that people who know very little bit about the town will
just pick
have
the
a
things they don't
found,
want.
will have an informed understanding of the scope of things they could look at. I'm digesting what was said here, because at the moment, like, nothing seems to have changed, but I think that we're moving emotionally in the right direction. Thoughts and prayers, God bless us. But I think that we've learned that the people respond to the menu that's placed in front of them.
We're
And the menu
reactionary.
being what we do for the warrants and all. So that is the template for how do we present a menu for people to help choose in a way that is more informed. And I don't know what that means. I want to dig into that a little bit in my own mind. But like, just a la carte feedback from the people, God bless them, we need them. But 10% of them show up, fewer than 10%, 1% of them show up to vote on things, and like, the loudest people are not going to be the most representative of the kinds of things we can get feedback on. So there's a bigger fish to fry here, and it has to involve the people who know what's going on in their department. So in this town right now, you can request somebody bring you a tree, and the DPW will bring you a tree, and they'll plant it for you, and there's a truck, and there's multiple people there digging in the ditch. Did anybody else know about that? I think it's a fantastic idea, but without somebody, and I don't know how much that costs, but honestly, is that the kind of thing that could be on the, I don't know. I would want somebody from the DPW to be able to say, you know, we have 100 different services. The bringing people a tree is really low-hanging fruit, pardon the pun.
Or
and
is serving
so
the
it's pretty
purpose of
good.
carbon, you know, reducing our carbon footprint.
Yeah, as that huge truck shows up to plant your bloody tree. Yeah, I'm
sorry.
all over it, you know? So I'm just saying, so.
I suspect a lot of that is grant funded.
Yeah, it might not cost the town
I-
anything. Will they
and
take
I
the
don't
tree
know.
away?
100%.
I got a bunch of those.
They came and took off.
Good.
Anyway, let's
I
not
couldn't
talk
get
about
him to
doing
take
it. It's
mine.
after 9, but yeah.
I'm gonna think into it, but like, yeah, I just, the à la carte letting the community know is very, very low value. Because we need to educate them to be able to help them make informed conversation. That's kind of our responsibility, like.
And part of it the other day where she said, have you had public hearings? I mean, I watched the public hearing for one of the groups was doing it. It was, I think,
Planning board?
conservation or something like that. And there were like 4 people that
Mhm.
came to it.
Well, the
and
truth is, we
and
monitor
and-
basically all the public hearings
yeah.
between all of us.
No, but I mean, like, what I'm just saying is you can have a public hearing, it doesn't mean you have public engagement from a wide variety of
Right.
stuff.
Yep.
2 of the people are on a large number of committees that showed up. One was a guy who was sort of just interested. So it's one thing to say you get public hearing to get input, but we
Yeah.
often don't
I-
get input.
Yeah, I kind of felt, I don't want to, I want to be careful, I don't want to use the word insulted, but I do. I kind of felt like we have, open forum, and we barely have anybody come and watch us anyway. And if it weren't for Westborough TV, clearly no one would be aware that we existed. So.
But I think with the liaisons, we do cover, like Jean said, a lot of
Well, right,
other things going on.
right, exactly. So I felt like that was really an absurd request, on top of the fact that, for the most part, we meet the most frequently of the typical committees in town. Or we put in a lot of hours. It's less than it used to be,
Probably
but-
4 months a year, but yeah, right, it's September, October, and.
Just feels
and
like
February,
forever.
March, yeah, it feels right now, because this was a huge month. Okay, we have I think it's time to head home. We have no minutes for tonight, we did get the minutes we'll do next time for that
Thank you.
tri-board meeting that just came out. And
Fine,
we'll
yeah.
probably have some more of our own. So unless anybody has anything else, then
Motion to adjourn?
that would be good.
McMahon, second?
All in favor? Nobody's opposed, we're adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV, good night.